The traffic on I-35 was moving just fast enough to feel like cruelty. My flight from New York had landed 40 minutes early, which should have been a gift, but gifts have a way of showing their true face only after you've unwrapped them. It was 6:47 in the evening, a Tuesday in November, and I promised Sophie I would read her bedtime story. Not just any story. The one about the rabbit who builds her own house after the wolves knock everything down. She had asked for that one specifically, her voice soft and hopeful through the phone the night before. I had promised. I never broke promises to my daughter. I pulled into our driveway in North Dallas just before 7. The house looked the way it always did from the outside. A clean 2-story craftsman with a wraparound porch my husband had never quite finished staining. The lights inside were blazing, warm and yellow, pushing out against the November dark. I heard the noise before I even got my seatbelt off. Not the television. Not the low murmur of a family winding down for the night. Laughter. Hard, braying laughter. The kind that doesn't care who hears it. I brought my rolling carry-on up the porch steps and pushed through the front door. The living room looked like a yard sale had fallen in love with a pizza parlor and had a child together. Empty wine bottles on my coffee table. The good cheese board I'd gotten for our anniversary, covered in cracker crumbs and olive pits. And there, sprawled across the sectional couch I was still paying off, was my sister-in-law Brianna, her bare feet tucked under her, laughing at something on her phone. My husband Ryan sat across from her in the armchair I had always thought of as mine, a bottle of craft beer dangling from 2 fingers. On the floor between them, Brianna's twin boys, 8 years old and built like they'd been fed on pure recklessness, were taking turns launching foam darts at the ceiling fan. "Maya!" Ryan's voice jumped up half an octave when he saw me. He sat forward in the chair, the beer bottle clanking against the side table. "You're early." "Flight was on time," I said, which wasn't quite a lie. I set my carry-on down carefully against the wall. I looked at Brianna's boys. I looked at the bottle rings on the table. I looked at my husband's guilty, rearranging expression. Then I looked around the room for the one person I wanted most to see. "Where's Sophie?" "She's around," Ryan said, waving a hand at the general concept of the house. Brianna didn't look up from her phone. "She got a little moody earlier. You know how she gets." I did know how Sophie got. She got quiet when she was overwhelmed. She got small when she felt invisible. She was 7 years old and she had learned to make herself disappear when the room was too loud for her. I knew this because I had spent 7 years paying attention. "Ryan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Where exactly is my daughter?" "Maya, don't start." I was already walking. I checked the kitchen, the backyard through the sliding glass door, dark and empty. The downstairs bathroom, nothing. I went up the stairs 2 at a time, checked her bedroom, which was dark, her stuffed elephant Peanut sitting neatly on her pillow in a way that meant she had not been in that room recently, because Sophie never left Peanut on the pillow when she was home. She always had him with her. I came back downstairs. I was moving fast now, the kind of fast that happens before your brain fully catches up to what your body already knows. I pushed through the hallway past the kitchen and opened the door to the laundry room. The light was off. The room smelled of detergent and cold air and the low hum of the water heater. I hit the switch. Sophie was in the corner between the washing machine and the wall, her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around Peanut so tightly her knuckles were pale. She was still in her school clothes. She had been crying long enough that her face had gone blotchy and still, the way kids go when they've cried past the point of expecting anyone to come. She looked up when the light hit her. "Mommy." Her voice was so small, I felt it in my back teeth. I crossed the room in 3 steps and got down on the cold tile floor and held her. She was shaking, a fine, constant tremor that I felt through my whole chest. I rubbed her back and rocked her and she cried into my shoulder, quiet and exhausted. "Baby, how long have you been in here?" She shook her head against my neck. "What happened, sweet girl?" It came out in pieces, the way terrible things always do when you're 7. Brianna's boys had come over after school. They had wanted to play with her Lego set, the big one she'd been building for 3 weeks. When she said it wasn't finished and they couldn't touch it yet, one of them knocked it apart on purpose. she'd cried. She'd gone to Ryan, and Ryan, standing in the living room with Brianna, had told her that she needed to learn to share and that she was being dramatic and that she should go to her room until she could behave like a good hostess. She hadn't wanted to be in her room because she could hear them laughing, so she'd come down to the laundry room where it was quiet. I sat on that tile floor for a long moment after she finished. I held my daughter and I felt something in me go absolutely still. Not numb. The opposite of numb. Every edge of my thinking sharpened into something cold and clear and purposeful. I picked Sophie up and carried her out of the laundry room and into the kitchen. I set her on the counter and found the box of cereal she liked and the good bowl with the moons on it. I poured her cereal and milk and I kissed the top of her head and told her to stay right there. Then I walked back into the living room. Ryan saw my face and his expression shifted into the defensive arrangement I'd come to recognize. Chin slightly forward, eyes calculating the room for exits. Brianna looked up from her phone for the first time. "The boys need to leave," I said. "Now." Brianna exhaled with theatrical patience. "Excuse me. Your boys need to leave. You need to leave. I'd like you to do that in the next 5 minutes." Ryan stood up. "Maya, you cannot. Our daughter has been locked in the laundry room for 3 hours, I said. My voice didn't shake. I was very proud of my voice. "In the dark. Because you sister's children destroyed something she worked on for weeks and you told her to go away and behave. You don't get to tell me what I cannot do in my own house." The word "my" landed the way I intended it to. Brianna stood up too, assuming the posture of someone deeply, theatrically wronged. I was not going to let some child have a meltdown and ruin our evening because she can't handle other kids touching her things. That's called spoiling, Maya. You should look it up. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked at Ryan. The man I had built a life with, or believed I was building a life with, was looking at the floor. "Get out," I said. I went back to the kitchen. I sat with Sophie while she finished her cereal. I heard the front door open and close. I heard Ryan's voice in the hallway, low and placating in a way he never used with me. I did not go out there. When Sophie was done eating, I took her upstairs and ran her a bath and found the rabbit book, and I read it to her twice, slowly, until she was asleep with Peanut tucked under her chin. I sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for a long time after that. Ryan came to the bedroom doorway. He had his conciliatory face on, the one that meant he had assessed the situation and decided apology was the most efficient path back to comfort. "She's fine, Maya. You're making this into something it isn't. How long was she in that room?" "I don't know. I wasn't watching the clock." "How long, Ryan?" A pause. "A couple hours. Maybe." "It was dark in there. She could have turned the light on." I looked at him, really looked at him. I noticed, not for the first time but for the last time in that particular way, that I was looking at a person I did not recognize. Not because he had changed, because I had finally stopped pretending. "I want you to sleep in the guest room tonight," I said. He started to argue. Then he looked at something in my expression and stopped. He slept in the guest room. I waited until I heard his breathing even out through the wall. Then I picked up my phone and went downstairs to the kitchen and sat at the table in the dark and dialed the number I knew by heart because I had saved it the way you save numbers you hope you'll never need. Carolyn Webb answered on the second ring. She had been my law school mentor and was now one of the most precise divorce attorneys in Dallas County. She did not say hello. She said, "Maya." "What happened?" I told her. "All of it. The laundry room, the shaking, the cereal, Ryan's face. The months before that, the slow erosion I'd been explaining away. 18 months of Ryan between jobs, finding himself, as he put it, while I billed 300 hours a quarter at my firm and managed everything from mortgage to Sophie's pediatric appointments. Brianna in our house 4 days out of 7. The way his explanations had started sounding like someone else's words. Caroline listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Okay, here's what you're going to do." She was methodical and specific in the way that made her expensive and worth every cent. She told me not to speak to Ryan about divorce, not a word. No confrontations, no ultimatums, no emotional conversations that he could later characterize as instability. She told me to open a separate bank account the next morning in my name only and to redirect my direct deposit immediately. She told me to document everything, the laundry room, the time, Sophie's condition, in a dated written record that night. She told me she would file an emergency petition for exclusive use of the marital home by Friday. "He's going to panic," she said. "I know. Good. Panicking people make mistakes. You're going to stay completely quiet and let him." I wrote everything down at the kitchen table that night, dated it, emailed it to myself. Then I opened a notes app and began a log that I would add to every day for the next several weeks, a quiet, meticulous record of the life I was leaving. The next morning, I took Sophie to school early, opened a new bank account at a branch 2 miles from my office, and was at my desk by 8:30. Ryan called 4 times before noon. I let all 4 go to voicemail. I listened to them in order during my lunch break. The first 2 were soft, confused, asking me to talk. The third was sharper. "This is ridiculous, Maya. You can't just shut me out." The fourth was the one Caroline had predicted, something about rights and the house and how I would regret this. I forwarded them all to Caroline with a single line, "For the file." She replied within minutes, "Perfect. Keep going." What I didn't expect was Brianna. I came home on Thursday to find her sitting on my front porch, arms folded, wearing the expression of someone who has practiced being aggrieved in the mirror. Ryan was not home. I knew because his car wasn't in the drive. Sophie was at her after-school program until 5. I stood at the base of the porch steps and looked at Brianna. "We need to talk," she said. Every careful, reasonable part of me said to go inside and close the door. But there was another part, the one Caroline had warned me about, that looked at Brianna's smug, settled posture and thought, "Let her talk." 5 minutes, I said, on the porch. I slipped my phone out of my bag and opened the voice memo app with my thumb and pressed record before I put it back in my pocket. I sat down in the porch chair across from her. What Brianna wanted was for me to drop whatever I was planning. She had gotten enough out of Ryan to know something was coming and go back to the way things were. She said this with the confidence of someone who has always gotten what she wanted by simply declaring that she deserved it. She said Ryan was going through a hard time and needed support, not a wife who abandoned ship the moment things got difficult. She said Sophie was a sensitive child who needed to toughen up, and that the laundry room incident, as she called it, was a gross exaggeration. I let her talk. I kept my face neutral and my hands still. Then she got to the part that mattered. "And frankly, Maya, if you push this, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you are. You're never home. You work all the time. You leave your daughter with a father who is doing his best, and then you blow in twice a week and act like you're the hero. A judge is going to find that very interesting." "You'd say that in court?" I asked, conversationally. "I'd say what I know to be true." She smiled. "I was there for Sophie when you weren't. A lot." "Okay," I said. "I think we're done." She blinked, surprised by the calm. She'd expected tears, or anger, or pleading. She stood up, recalibrated. "I'm serious, Maya. I know you are," I said. "Goodbye, Brianna." I waited until her car turned off the street. Then I took my phone out, stopped the recording, and played back 30 seconds. Her voice came through clean and clear. "A judge is going to find that very interesting." I emailed the file to Caroline before I went inside to start Sophie's dinner. Caroline called 20 minutes later. I had never heard her sound genuinely delighted before. It was a small, controlled sound, but it was there. "You recorded her." Front porch, she came to me. "Maya." A pause. "This is a gift. Threat of perjury, admission of intent to misrepresent your parenting to the court," and she confirmed the relationship. "Send me the full file." Her voice shifted back into its usual precision. "We go Friday. Emergency petition, exclusive occupancy, temporary sole custody. Ryan is not going to see this coming." He didn't. The Friday papers were served to him at 2 in the afternoon at the house. I was in my office billing a deposition when Caroline texted, "Confirmed receipt." "He's been advised. Watch your phone. It rang at 2717, then 2019, then 2007, then 2000, then 2000, then 5 times in rapid succession, the calls overlapping like he was hitting redial without waiting. I did not answer. The text started at 2:30. They began with disbelief. What is this? What did you do? Call me right now, and escalated predictably into something uglier. By the 4th message, he was calling me things I will not repeat and making promises about what he would do if I tried to take Sophie from him. I screenshotted each one in order and sent them to Caroline. She sent back a single word, beautiful. Ryan appeared at my office building at 4:45. I knew because my assistant Kezia texted me from the lobby. Your husband is here. He is a lot right now. Security is watching him. I told her to have security escort him out if he caused a scene. He caused a scene. Security escorted him out if he caused a scene. Security escorted him out. Kezia documented the entire thing with the calm competence that made her the best assistant I had ever had. I did not leave my office until 6:15, by which point Ryan's car was gone from the visitor lot, and Kezia had left me a typed summary of events with timestamps. I picked Sophie up from my neighbor's house where she'd spent the afternoon playing. Sophie didn't ask about her father. She talked about a science project all the way home. The court hearing was the following Wednesday. I sat beside Caroline at the plaintiff's table in a quiet navy blazer, my hair pulled back, my hands folded in front of me. Ryan came in with a lawyer I had never seen before, a large man with an impressive voice and very little actual strategy, which became apparent quickly. Ryan's attorney made the expected arguments: devoted father, working mother, parenting differences. He used the word overreaction 3 times in his opening statement, which I watched Judge Patricia Harmon receive with the expression of a woman who has heard the word overreaction applied to children crying in the dark one too many times. Caroline stood up and was succinct. She described the laundry room. She described the duration. She described Sophie's physical state when I found her, her age, the November temperature in an interior room without a functioning heat vent. She described Ryan's response, which was to tell a 7-year-old girl to go away until she could behave better. Ryan's attorney objected twice. Both objections were overruled. Then Caroline said she had an audio recording she would like to enter into evidence. Ryan's attorney straightened. Ryan himself went still in a way that told me he hadn't told his lawyer about Brianna's visit. The recording played in that quiet courtroom. Brianna's voice came through the laptop speakers perfectly clear. A judge is going to find that very interesting. I watched Ryan's attorney hear, for the first time, that his client's sister had come to my home to threaten me with perjured testimony before the case was even filed. Judge Harmon's face did not change, but she wrote something down. The cross-examination of Ryan was short. Caroline asked him how long Sophie had been in the laundry room. He said he wasn't sure. She asked if the room had a working heat source. He said he didn't think that was relevant. She asked if he believed that a 7-year-old child placed in a cold, dark room for an extended period because she was upset constituted appropriate discipline. He said that children needed boundaries. Caroline said no further questions. Judge Harmon granted temporary sole custody to me, exclusive occupancy of the marital home, a no-contact order preventing Ryan from approaching my workplace, Sophie's school, or coming within 100 feet of me without prior legal arrangement, supervised visitation only, pending a full custody evaluation and a psychological assessment of both parents. Ryan sat at his table afterward with the expression of a man watching a building he thought he owned collapse in real time. Caroline walked me out of the courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, she said, "He'll appeal the exclusivity order. He won't win. Start thinking about what you want from the financials." She handed me a card. "This is the forensic accountant I use. Call her this week." I called her that afternoon. What Sandra Kim found in Ryan's financial records over the following 3 weeks was not the worst thing I had ever seen professionally, but it was the most personal. Ryan had opened an LLC 14 months earlier. RVST Ventures, a name I had never heard, using our joint account as its initial capitalization. At the time, he described the withdrawal as a professional development investment. I had been in the middle of a major merger transaction and had trusted him with our shared accounts in the way you trust someone you're married to, which is to say completely and without looking. RVST Ventures had one client, one outgoing transaction stream. Every dollar that passed through it went to a company called Bloom & Co. Creative Consulting, registered and Brianna's name and address, described in its filings as a boutique social media marketing firm. Bloom & Co. had no verifiable clients, no public presence, no office. It had, according to Sandra's analysis, received slightly over $190,000 of my money over 14 months. When I called Caroline with the numbers, there was a long pause. "That's not a marital dispute," she said. "That's fraud, potentially wire fraud, depending on how he moved the money. It goes to Brianna's company." Another pause, even longer. "Okay, call your white-collar contact at the U.S. Attorney's office." I had one. His name was Agent David Castillo, and I had worked with his office on a financial crimes case 2 years earlier. He was professional, thorough, and had no patience for wasted time. I met him and his colleague in Caroline's office the following Monday with Sandra's analysis and every document I had. Agent Castillo asked clean, specific questions. He did not tell me what the outcome would be. He told me what he would need and what I should not touch. "Don't confront him," he said, standing up. "Don't tell him about this meeting. Don't access those accounts or that laptop again. You've done the right thing coming here. Let us work." I drove to Sophie's school and picked her up and took her for ice cream, and we sat in a booth and she told me about a girl in her class named Olive who could do a backflip, and I listened to every word. For 2 weeks, I lived in a kind of suspended state, moving through work and school pickups and grocery runs, while somewhere below the surface an investigation was assembling itself piece by piece. Ryan had gone quiet in a way that scared me more than his earlier noise had. His texts had stopped. His calls had stopped. Brianna had stopped appearing. The silence felt deliberate, coordinated. On a Thursday morning, I dropped Sophie at school and was driving to work when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was Ryan. New number. His voice had changed completely from the fury of the weeks before. He sounded the way people sound when they have been awake for many nights in a row. "I know about Castillo," he said. A cold feeling moved through me. I kept driving. "I need 5 minutes," he said. "I'm not going to do anything. I just need you to hear me." I should have hung up. I knew I should have hung up. But there was a part of me that needed to look directly at the thing I had been living with, needed to hear it admit itself out loud. "Where?" I said. He named the parking garage attached to the Target near our house. Bottom level. He'd stay in his car. I called Caroline immediately after I hung up. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail telling her exactly where I was going, that I would be there for 5 minutes only, that I had my phone and would call 911 if anything felt wrong. Then I texted Kezia, "If I don't text you back by 9:40, call the police and give them this address." I parked under fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered. Ryan's car was in the far corner, away from the cameras I could see mounted at the level's entrance. He got out when he saw me. I stayed by the elevator, my hand around my phone. He looked diminished in a way I hadn't expected. Not thin exactly, but compressed, like something had been pressing down on him. "I need you to tell Castillo it was a misunderstanding," he said. "Tell him you authorized the transfers. Tell him it was a joint business decision. You want me to lie to federal agents. It wasn't stealing, Maya. I was trying to build something. Brianna had this idea and I thought it could grow, and I was going to tell you when it turned a profit. You put $190,000 into an account in your sister's name without telling me. It was an investment. It was my money, Ryan. It was my salary. It was what I made while you were finding yourself for 18 months. I heard my voice stay even and was proud of it again, the way I had been proud of it in the living room the night I found Sophie. I'm not going to lie to federal investigators." Something moved across his face, the last of the calculation. If I go down for this, I will fight you on Sophie, he said. I will fight you for years. I will make this as hard as I can. But if you help me, if you tell them it was a joint decision, I'll sign whatever you want. Sole custody. Everything. You'll never see me again. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about Sophie in the dark laundry room, arms around Peanut, waiting. I thought about what it would mean for her to grow up, knowing what he had done, what he had been willing to do. I'm not going to help you, I said. And if you contact me again on a number that isn't your attorney's, I'm adding it to the contempt file. I turned and got in the elevator. I sat in my car in the sun outside the parking garage and called Caroline and told her every word of the conversation. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "That's attempted obstruction of justice. Write it down tonight, everything you remember, time-stamped, send it to me." I wrote it down that evening at my kitchen table while Sophie slept upstairs. The arrest happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks later. I was in a client meeting when Kezia knocked and slid a note through the door. "Turn on your phone. The news." I excused myself. The local Dallas NBC affiliate was running a live shot outside a glass office building in Addison I vaguely recognized as the address Bloom & Co. had listed in its filings. 2 federal vehicles were parked at angles on the sidewalk. I watched a man in a jacket that read U.S. Attorney walk out the main doors. I watched 2 other agents follow, and between them, my husband. Ryan had his head down. He was not in handcuffs yet, but his hands were in front of him and he was moving the way people move when they understand that the options have run out. I watched until the segment cut to a press conference. The assistant U.S. attorney was brief and specific. A fraudulent consulting scheme, wire fraud, misappropriation of marital funds to capitalize a fictitious business entity. 2 individuals. 2. The camera cut to a second location, and I saw Brianna being walked out of what I recognized as her apartment building. She was not quiet the way Ryan was. She was loud, her voice raised in something between argument and performance, her hair loose. She looked directly at the cameras. I turned my phone over and set it face down on the conference table. Caroline called at noon. "You've seen the news." "Yes. Brianna is already talking to the prosecutors. She's offering Ryan up for a reduced sentence, a beat. He'll take a deal." "This is over, Maya. The divorce will be clean. He has nothing left to fight with." I was at my desk. Through the window, I could see the Dallas skyline, flat and bright in the November sun, exactly the same as it had always been. "Call me when you have numbers," I said. The final divorce hearing was 3 months later, a formality so brief it felt out of proportion to everything that had preceded it. Ryan appeared by video from a federal processing center. His attorney presented a complete capitulation, no contest on the house, no alimony claim, sole legal and physical custody of Sophie transferred to me without condition. Ryan had agreed to a plea deal on 2 federal charges. He would be sentenced the following month. When it was over, Judge Harmon signed the order and looked up briefly. "Ms. Reyes," she said, "I hope you and your daughter have a peaceful year." I walked out into the afternoon. I picked Sophie up from school. She came running out of her classroom with a drawing she'd made in art, a house with a red door and 2 figures in front of it, one tall and one small, both with curly hair like hers and mine. "That's us," she said, pointing at the smaller figure. "And that's you." She pointed at the taller one. "And that's our new house." "We don't have a new house yet," I said, kneeling down. "I know." She folded the picture carefully and put it in my hand. "But we can pick one." "Can we pick one with a yard?" "For a trampoline?" "Absolutely for a trampoline," I said. She took my hand and walked toward the car and chattered about trampolines and what color she wanted her room to be and whether dogs were allowed in the new neighborhood. And I listened to all of it and did not say a word until she had finished. Ryan wrote to me once, 7 weeks later. The letter came on official institutional stationery and the handwriting was careful, like he had thought about every sentence before committing it to paper. He said he was sorry. He said he had told himself so many things for so long that he had stopped being able to tell them from the truth. He said he thought about Sophie all the time and hoped she was okay. He said she didn't have to tell Sophie anything about him right now if she didn't want to. He said I had been right to leave. I read it once. I folded it back into the envelope. I carried it to the fireplace in the living room and placed it on the grate and lit a match. I watched it take a while to start, the way heavy paper does. And then it went quickly, the edges curling black. When there was nothing left but a twist of ash, I went upstairs and helped Sophie with her bath and read her the rabbit story and turned out her light. We moved in April to a smaller house in a quieter part of Austin, with a yard big enough for the trampoline I had promised and a back porch facing east where I could have coffee in the mornings and watch Sophie jump in the early light. I had taken a position at a firm there. Fewer hours, more intention. The Dallas chapter was closed. One Saturday in May, 6 months after that November evening when I pushed open the laundry room door and found my daughter waiting, Sophie and I drove to Barton Creek and spread a blanket on the grass near the water and ate sandwiches and watched the ducks. Sophie was talking fast and constantly, the way she did when she was completely happy, switching subjects in the way of someone who has so much to say they can't quite sequence it. She told me about a book she wanted to read and a friend named Petra who was going to come over next week and a dream she'd had about a purple horse. Then she stopped talking for a moment, which was unusual, and looked at the water. "Mom," she said. "Yeah, bug. I don't think about the laundry room anymore." I looked at the side of her face, the sun catching the red in her curls. "You don't have to," I said. "I know." She picked a piece of grass and turned it in her fingers. "I was just thinking that I used to be scared when I came home. Like nervous. And now I'm not. I'm just happy." She looked up at me. "Is that okay?" I pulled her close and held her against my side and looked at the creek and the trees and the light coming through in pieces, and I said, "That is the most okay thing I've ever heard." She burrowed into my side for a moment, then bounced back up to reach for another sandwich. I sat there and thought about the year behind us, the phone calls and the recordings in the courtrooms and the ash. I thought about the woman who had stood in a cold laundry room doorway and made a decision so fast it felt like reflex, but was actually the most deliberate thing she had ever done. And then I stopped thinking about it, because Sophie was talking again, and the creek was moving, and the afternoon light was warm, and there were better things to listen to.